Hello and welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen. Today we're making spicy sausage gravy and biscuits. So in this video we're going to do biscuits and the gravy at the same time. So we want to start with the biscuits first. You're going to start with 2 cups of flour. To this you're adding 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, 3/4 teaspoons of salt, a half teaspoon of sugar. We're going to add shortening, which is 1/4 cup. And to this we're adding 1 stick of butter that's cut up into smaller pieces, which is important to cut it up so that way it's easier to break up when you're doing the mix. So once everything is in your bowl, you need to start mixing it through. As you push down onto the butter, you're going to be breaking it up into the flour. The whole goal is to get this very small pieces of butter. You don't want any large hunks of it. It's kind of like breaking it up into little pieces that are like a large grain of rice. I mean, you just basically want it to a point to where it's not too large, because then it won't bake properly. And as you're doing this, you're mixing all your ingredients through, because you are going to be mixing quite a lot to get this whole thing mixed together. I suggest scraping the sides, pulling the actual flour in from the side of the bowl, and that way you know if you're missing any pieces of the butter as you're doing it. This may take a couple minutes to get completely through, but it is important to do it. Just remember, as you're doing this, work your way around the bowl and pull in from different sides, so that way you make sure everything is mixed thoroughly. Now, once you've got it completely mixed, you are going to add buttermilk. I use about a cup of buttermilk to mix through this. If yours comes out dry, and sometimes it may, it just depends on if the flour was not measured properly or whatever, you can always add more buttermilk to moisten it up, because you don't want this really wet, but you also don't want it really dry either. You're kind of going for a middle of the road. Pour in only about a half of your buttermilk when you start mixing it, and then bring the rest in, so that way you can literally just mix through. And keep going at it with your fork until it all becomes really solid but kind of sticky. It doesn't have to be a lot of sticky, but you kind of just want it to a point where everything is conformed together. You don't want a lot of flour left in the bottom that's dry. You want to pull that all in. And once you get it all mixed up, you're going to need something like a cutting board with some flour on it and a biscuit cutter. Just bring out as much as you need to work with at a time. I usually bring out enough to where I can do a couple of biscuits each time. Put a little flour on top so that way it doesn't stick to your hand, and actually put a little flour on your cutter, and then you're just going to go through and cut these one at a time. You probably want the thickness of these things about a ½ an inch thick or so, because they're going to rise up as you cook them. If you like a thicker biscuit, then make them thicker, because when you bake it, it will get thicker. Just keep in mind, you want a size that you think is appropriate for what you want to eat. So for what I do with this, usually it comes up to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about maybe 10 biscuits or so, depending on how thick I make them. You probably could get a couple more out of it, but I like mine decently thick, because I don't really thin ones, because I like to slice them and put something on them like meat or whatever sometimes. So I kind of like do this, because you're not going to eat all of these in one shot. Sometimes you have them left over. They reheat very well as long as you just pop them in the microwave for about like 20 some seconds, and you got a warm biscuit again. Probably good for a day or two. So they're really good. Just store them somewhere in a sealed bag. You're good to go. So just continue making your biscuits until you run out of the dough. In the meantime, you need to preheat your oven to about 425 or so degrees, because these are going to stay in there for a little, around maybe 20 minutes to 23, 24, depending on your oven. My oven runs low, so that way I always leave mine a little bit longer. When you're ready to get these ready to go in the oven, I always take like a pie pan, line it with foil and spray it with like a nonstick cooking spray. And then I just put these in and make a ring around it to where they all fit in. Because as they push together, they'll rise up bigger when they cook, and that's always a great thing. And as you can see, in a pie pan, you get quite a few. And when they come out of the oven and they're already cooked, this is what they look like. So when they're done, you can set these to the side and get ready to make your sausage gravy. Alright, when you're making your gravy, you want to start with a large skillet. You're going to cover the bottom with oil. To this, you are going to have cut up onion. You are going to use at least 1/4 cup of onion, and you want to mix it through the oil and get it coated. To this, you're going to add 5 ounces of breakfast sausage. Now, mind you, you can get this mild, you can get this hot, you can get it whatever. I suggest staying with the mild, because when you put your own seasonings in, you're determining the level of heat in this. And if you want something spicy, you can actually do it the way you want to do it, rather than the way they think it should be by saying, here's some hot sausage, eat it. Well, it's your choice of how hot it is. If you don't want it severely hot, then don't make it that hot. You can adjust the amount of the different things like the cayenne pepper or whatever that goes into it to make it hot. So as this is in your pan, let it sizzle, break it up, mix the onions in too. It's going to take a couple of minutes to break this up. You want this in small pieces. You don't want large pieces in your gravy, because sometimes large pieces are a little too much to deal with. So just break it up as it cooks. As you see the color changing, that's going to be easier to break up. So keep turning it over and mixing the onions through as it cooks. Just remember, you want to make sure that the sausage is cooked entirely before you put anything else in the pan. You don't want half-cooked sausage, that's not good. So as you really got a good sizzle going on in the pan, you can tell this stuff really is going to break up quickly at this point. The good thing about it is you're almost done when you see it really getting to this point. So just keep breaking it, stirring it, flipping it over, making sure that all the sides are equally the same color. You don't want to see any pink at this point. But if you give it another minute or so, it should be pretty much to where you need it. So as this is sizzling, we're going to add some seasoning to it. So you're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and 1/4 teaspoon of paprika. And once these are in, you want to mix them throughout all of the sausage and onions. So stir them up well. Make sure that the color goes throughout everything, and the whole thing in the pan should turn a similar color of an orangish red. So keep mixing it up until you get it through everything, because it's important that you have all of this mixed. So you don't want lumps of pepper or seasoning in one spot and you bite into it and you get a mouthful of it. It's not really great. So just keep stirring. So once you've gotten to this point, you pretty much should be mixed through. We're going to add flour. You're using 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Do not have to put it all in at once. You can just do some of it, mix it through until it gets wet, and then bring the rest in. Once you do get it all in though, you really want to make sure it's all incorporated, and then you want this to sizzle and cook for a few minutes, because that'll take away the taste of the flour. Because if you don't do it, it might end up tasting kind of floury. It's just one of those tastes you want to get rid of. And the more you cook it in with the sausage, the more it's going to bond with it, and the flavor will change more to the spicy taste you want in your gravy. So once you have it all mixed through, you're going to get ready to add your milk. You're going to have 1.5 to 2.5 cups of milk. Depending on how thick your flour worked out, is going to depend on how much milk you need. You may only need about 1.5 cups to 2 cups. I used about 2.5 cups just because of the fact my flour was a little thick in there. And as you add it, you're going to find that the more you add the milk, the less thickness you're going to have to deal with the gravy, because sometimes gravy is too thick and you don't want that. You want this to be silky and smooth and flowing. So you keep adding your milk until it gets to a point where, as it thickens, you add a little bit more milk to it until you get it to a point where it's about the consistency you want. Because people like their stuff differently. I like my gravy a little bit thinner. So just put your milk in, mix it up until you get it to a point where you're happy with it. And continue to stir the whole time. Usually this takes a few minutes to actually cook this through. I mean, at least 5 or 6 minutes, depending on how high your heat is. But you will know when it's done. And when you're finished, break open some biscuits, put them on your plate, and then just spoon your gravy over top. And there you have it, the final effect. You have great biscuits with some great spicy sausage gravy, which you can pair this with eggs, potatoes, whatever, and have a really great breakfast. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Have a great day.